In a quiet town nestled between gentle hills and golden fields lived an old man named Harold. He had just turned 73. His children had long moved to distant cities, and his beloved wife, Martha, had passed away 6 winters ago. Since then, Harold's only companion was a golden retriever named Benny. Benny wasn't just a dog. He was Martha's last gift to Harold. She had chosen Benny from a litter at the local shelter, insisting the pup would keep Harold company long after she was gone. Benny had been just 6 weeks old then, a ball of fluff with oversized ears and clumsy paws. He'd grown up with Harold through quiet mornings, lonely dinners, and slow walks along the river. Harold would talk to Benny every day about the weather, the tomatoes in his garden, old war memories, and sometimes just silence. Benny never complained. He listened, wagged his tail, and rested his head gently on Harold's knee when words were too heavy to carry. They had a routine, simple but sacred. Every morning at 6 a.m., they walked down the path by the river. Benny would chase the squirrels he never caught, and Harold would sip his lukewarm coffee from a thermos Martha had given him decades ago. Every evening they'd sit on the old wooden bench under the oak tree, watching the sun dip behind the hills. As the years passed, both Harold and Benny grew slower. Benny, once so full of energy, now had cloudy eyes and hips that trembled after walks. But he never let Harold see him suffer. Dogs are like that. They carry your pain without complaint, and they hide theirs behind wagging tails. One cold October morning, Benny didn't get up. Harold called him softly, then louder. Benny looked up with tired eyes, tried to rise, and whimpered. Harold felt a pang in his chest that had nothing to do with his age. He sat beside Benny on the floor and ran his hand through the thinning fur. "I know, boy," he whispered. "I know." He called the vet, a kind woman named Dr. Lang who had treated Benny since he was a pup. She came to the house, examined Benny gently, and looked up at Harold with eyes that had seen this far too many times. "He's in pain, Harold," she said softly. "He's held on as long as he could for you. But it's time to let him go." The silence in the room was deafening. Harold nodded slowly, tears already running down his cheeks. Can we do it here? At home?" Dr. Lang smiled sadly. "Of course." Harold sat on the floor beside Benny, cradling his head in his lap. The fire crackled softly in the hearth, the only sound besides Harold's quiet sobs. "You've been a good boy," he whispered, voice breaking. "You stayed with me when everyone else left. You kept me breathing, Benny. Thank you." As the injection was given, Benny looked up at Harold one last time, his eyes full of love and peace. Then, slowly, he let out a final breath and went still. Harold didn't move for a long time. He just sat there, stroking Benny's head, remembering every walk, every bark, every look. The house felt impossibly empty after that. He couldn't bear to throw away Benny's toys or the old leash that still hung by the door. Some days he thought he heard Benny's paws clicking on the hardwood floor or his tail thumping the wall. Weeks passed, then months. One day, Harold received a letter from the local shelter. It was handwritten, from a young volunteer who had heard of Benny. "Dear Mr. Harold, my name is Lily. I help out at the shelter where Benny came from. I was just a teenager back then, but I remember how happy we were when your wife chose him. I also heard from Dr. Lang what a beautiful life Benny had with you. We recently rescued a senior dog, Max. He's 10 years old, quiet, and has been through a lot. He doesn't trust people much, but I believe he just needs someone gentle. I thought of you." Harold folded the letter carefully and stared out the window. The bench under the oak tree looked lonelier than ever. He visited the shelter the next morning. Max was nothing like Benny. He was a large black dog with scars on his muzzle and a missing part of one ear. He didn't approach Harold at first, just watched him warily from the corner of the kennel. Harold sat down on the cold floor and said nothing. He just sat, like he had done for Benny so many times. Minutes passed. Then Max got up and walked over, slowly, cautiously. He placed his head on Harold's lap, just like Benny used to. Harold cried then, not just for Max or Benny, but for all the time lost and all the love yet to give. He adopted Max that day. They walked home together, slowly. Harold spoke softly, and Max listened. And though the path by the river would never be quite the same, the bench under the oak tree welcomed them both. Two souls, wounded but healing, walking each other home. Where every goodbye carries a memory, and every paw print leads to love. Harold was 73 and had lived in the same little house at the end of Willow Lane for over 40 years. The home used to echo with life, his wife Martha's laughter in the kitchen, the patter of children's feet running down the hallway, and the soft jazz that played on Saturday mornings while they made pancakes together. But those sounds had faded. His children were grown and gone, living lives hundreds of miles away. Martha had passed 6 years earlier, quietly and far too soon. And now it was just Harold and Benny, a golden retriever with cloudy eyes and a heart that had never wavered. Benny had come into Harold's life as a gift from Martha. Just weeks before she died, she'd placed the little pup in his arms and said, "So you won't be alone when I'm gone." At first, Harold didn't think he could handle the responsibility. He was grieving, tired, and unsure he had the strength to care for anything. But Benny didn't need much, just time, patience, and a quiet place to belong. And day by day, Benny gave Harold something far greater, a reason to wake up. Every morning at 6, no matter the weather, Harold would lace up his old boots, wrap a scarf around his neck, and clip the leash onto Benny's collar. Together, they walked the winding path to the river. Benny would sniff every tree, chase invisible squirrels, and sometimes just sit still beside Harold under the old oak tree. They rarely spoke, at least not in words, but their silence was full of understanding. Neighbors often saw them and smiled. "There goes Harold and his shadow," they'd say, watching the man and dog shuffle slowly by. In the evenings, they'd sit on the front porch, Harold with his tea, Benny curled at his feet. Sometimes Harold would